How's everybody doing today? Before we begin this panel, I just want to, make sure we give the appropriate acknowledgments. Let's give a round to the folks from VetIndexus, to Nick Antaki, to George Altman, y'all. Please, just give them a round as far as the folks who are behind this. Yeah. Also, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge just a few other folks before we get to what we need to do. And just so everyone's on the same sheet of music, we've got a time hack to end by 11:05 with this panel. So the goal for me is to get through our discussion and to turn it over to you all for the Q&A portion no later than 11, just so everyone knows what we're all doing here. But I just want to make sure we acknowledge certain folks. Our keynotes, Dr. Yashika Neves, who spoke earlier today from the Department of Defense, the Chief for Strategic Plans and Initiatives. Our afternoon keynote, the Honorable James Rodriguez, Assistant Secretary from Department of Labor, who runs DOL Vets. Want to acknowledge our sponsors: Gold sponsor, GM; Silver sponsors, Comcast, Pfizer, GXO, USAA. Our Bronze sponsors, ETF Global, Spectrum, United Rentals, and our event friends: Advanced Auto Parts, AmeriVet Securities, Call of Duty Endowment, General Dynamics, MCFA, Raytheon Technologies, and Western Governors University. As was mentioned, my name is James Hendon. I serve as Commissioner for the New York City Department of Veteran Services. I'm so happy to moderate this panel today. The topic: leveraging the leadership and resilience of veterans. I'm going to call out our panel participants so we know who they are, say a little bit, and then we'll just get to our discussion. On this panel today, we have U.S. Navy retired Captain, 28 years of experience, Dan Goldenberg, currently Vice President and Executive Director, Call of Duty Endowment. We can give these guys a round. Let's give a round. Let's start out with Dan. Also, U.S. Marine Corps Infantry Captain, retired, Jesse Gemberling Johnson, Director of Talent Recruitment and Development for MCFA. Let's give Jesse a round, everybody. Yep. Rear Admiral, U.S. Navy, retired, Jeffrey Harley, PhD, Director of Military Engagement for Western Governors University. Go around for Jeff. Last but not least, we got Seth Peterson, Army Lieutenant Colonel, retired, 21 years, correct?
Not Lieutenant Colonel.
I'm so sorry.
That'd be awesome.
So sorry. Army, 21 years, Corporate Citizenship Manager, Director of Military, from the Military and Veterans Affairs Wing from Pfizer. Let's give Seth a round. I'm so sorry, y'all. I'm giving him a promotion, giving him a promotion right now.
Hey.
Yeah. So, as we get ready to talk about burnout, I just want us to level set. According to the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality, burnout is defined from a psychological context as a long-term stress reaction marked by emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a lack of a sense of personal accomplishment. In other words, on the emotional exhaustion piece, limited emotional resources. I don't have enough gas in the tank to be who I need to be for you right now. For depersonalization, it's treating colleagues as though they're objects rather than human beings. I'm so numb, you're just a thing to me. I don't see you as deeper than that at this time. And then there's this low sense of personal accomplishment, a feeling that one's work does not make a difference. What's tricky here, a Deloitte study tells us that on one hand, 87% of professionals say they have passion for their current job. On the other hand, 64% say that they're frequently stressed out or frustrated with the job. 77% in their current job says, look, I've experienced what we just defined as burnout. Everything from 31% say on the leader side, I have a lack of support or recognition from my leadership. 30% say unrealistic deadlines or results are placed upon me. 29% say I'm consistently working long hours and on weekends. And so we're here today to discuss leadership and resilience with people who have lived in situations like these in two worlds. One world is the world of the military. Some would argue that there's no alternative to accomplishing the mission at all when you have that uniform on. The costs, including navigating what it means to be resilient, are just too great for us to do anything but have mission success. Other world that these panelists navigate is the civilian world, which, as all of us know, can in certain ways be less transparent, and it can be dynamic in different contexts. And so I'd like for us to discuss this, looking at it not just from the employee aspect, but also the employer aspect, leadership and followership, as we try to gather pro tips from the military and veteran side of things and see how it plays out in the civilian world to be able to benefit all. And so with that, we just want to start passing the mic around on our first question. And I'll start with Dan. We'll start with you, and anyone else wants to take it. And like I said, everybody, I want to get to a place where sometime between 10:55 and 11, you can come up with your questions so we can all get into this. So starting with you, Dan, what unique perspectives and experiences do military veterans bring to the workplace, and how can they be harnessed to drive innovation and success?
Thanks so much. I think I'll start by saying I love your two worlds analogy. I've lived in those two worlds. My first 10 years was active duty, flying planes and working in the Pentagon. My next 10 years was in the pure commercial sector and in the reserves. And then my next 10 years was running a foundation focused on veterans and being in a Fortune 500 company as an executive. So I feel like I've, as an active duty member, as a reserve member and leader, as a corporate leader, and in the veteran space, I've had a nice sort of vantage point every way about the two worlds problem. I will tell you this, have to level set a little bit. Veterans coming, especially transitioning service members coming out, TAP is a necessary but grossly insufficient program to prepare them for the world. I've seen a lot of heads nodding here. It's 101, right? Veterans need a lot more personalized attention than they get from TAP. We're the largest funder of veteran employment in the world. We've placed 113,000 vets through our funding. We fund the highest performing veteran nonprofits that do this work. They do it for 1/13 the cost of the Department of Labor. And what they do is they prepare these veterans. The most important two things, and veterans are 3 times more likely to get a good job that's high fit if they do this, is they get professional one-on-one help with their resume and professional one-on-one help with their interview prep. Part of that process is getting them ready to acclimate to the corporate or civilian employer world. If that's done properly, they're ready and they're going to be great. They're going to bring their characteristics that we've heard earlier of resilience, of creative problem solving, of working in lean environments. They're going to bring that to the table. And I work my non-foundation running hat is as a VP of corporate social responsibility and ESG at a Fortune 500 company. And seeing when times are stressful, how well veterans deal with that, how they can be a calming force when people are freaking out over not super important stuff or in the overall scheme of things, is perhaps the greatest contribution I've seen.
Yeah, so we're talking leadership and resilience of veterans. Those are 2 non-technical skills that we're talking about here. So to tie into what Dr. Neves was talking about, and not to ruffle too many feathers here, George, but the title of this conference, I don't know if it's fully accurate. Employing U.S. vets is really an important, but it's a critical first step of, I think, what we're actually trying to accomplish here. And that's inevitably identifying the value and the mutual benefit that veterans bring to the organizations, and that organizations can deliver value as a result of that. So it's this mutual benefit. But tying into the non-technical skills, I wrote a graduate school thesis entitled An Organizational Guide to Leveraging Military Veteran Human Capital. And the intent of it was to understand what companies are doing in the civilian workforce that is tapping into these non-technical skills that veterans transfer from their time learning and operating in the military into the civilian workforce. Interviewed 27 veterans across 9 different industries to really understand what was being leveraged and how organizations were engaging these non-technical skills that were creating value. And the non-technical skills that were reported were creativity and collaboration, adaptability and resilience, servant leadership, visibility into diverse work teams, and effectiveness under pressure. And in essence, what those were the non-technical skills that veterans were reporting adding value or contributing value, and how organizations were tapping into that was through 4 different organizational engagement drivers. And those were challenge, motivation, community, and communication. And it was through those integrations in performance reviews and engagement with their veteran employees, they were able to put veterans in a position to offer those non-technical skills. Because at the end of the day, the The biggest report that I got back from interviewing all these veterans, in fact, 2 of them happen to be in this room right here, 27 veterans, industry agnostic, was they want to contribute value to organizations, and they want the organizations to feel like their efforts are being valuable and they give a shit about what they are bringing to the table and the time that they're spending. So I think it's really critical that Dr. Neef highlighted that. Essential skills, call it whatever you want, but 90% of us veterans that are going into the civilian workforce are not transferring the technical skills of our MOS in the military. So really understanding leadership and resilience are non-technical skills, and that's the asset that can provide value in the civilian workplace.
I love the dialogue so far, and as the education guy, I think I'm here to add the idea that education makes individuals even more resilient. So we're talking about some of the different challenges that exist, but as you deal with individuals, please talk to them about what an additional education benefit can lend to their resume, lend to their productivity. As the keynote speaker discussed this morning, jackpot if you get not only the skill sets that we've been talking about up here on the stage, but also somebody with that education, which provides individuals with either a particular certification in their ability to do the skills, or offers a different way of thinking about a particular industry. Western Governors University offers that to individual students, as do so many other partners, but no one can deny what education brings to a lifelong economic opportunity. It's about $1 million over the course of your lifetime. It's about $30,000 more in income per year. So as people look at ways that they can further their resiliency, as we provide practical recommendations for individuals, certainly finding ways to bridge the skill sets into opportunities that exist in the workforce, I would just suggest that these can be enhanced by education.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with all that. I think that in the workforce, something that we need to, I guess, also recognize is not every one of the veterans coming over has 20, 30 years in the military. Some of them are initial entry, and then they came out, and now they're looking to break into the workforce. And they are resilient because a lot of them, they came out of high school, they went right into the military, something completely different. They went overseas, a lot of them. They were put in highly stressful situations. They had to make on-the-spot decisions with, strategic impacts on some of those things. They come out, they come into a corporate world, and they're hungry, right? They're hungry to make an impact, and they're hungry to show what they can do. And I think we need to take advantage of that they have and utilize that. Ask them questions. Ask them about their experiences in the military and how that can benefit them. I think from my experience coming out of the military, I am always eager to discuss my previous experiences and how those can help the company. And I think we need to engage or embrace that and at any given time, like try to pull from them some of those nuggets of leadership that they, even a lower level, like we talked about earlier, those E4 to E6s are still having like a lot of experience in leadership. So even those lower level people coming in, like let's embrace what they have to offer and take some of their recommendations to heart.
We've been talking about this in a way where it's speaking to the employer community, and it's speaking to also all the external players here. I know, Jeff, you touched the education piece of it as far as what veterans can do with education, especially with the WG you had on. I want to touch something that speaks directly to the military veteran. So what steps can military veterans take to effectively advocate for themselves and their unique contributions in the civilian workplace, while also building strong relationships with their colleagues and superiors? So one more time, it's what steps can military veterans take to effectively advocate for themselves and their unique contributions in the civilian workplace, while also building strong relationships with their colleagues and superiors?
Sure, I'll start. Referring to what I said earlier, veterans are 2 to 3 times more likely to land a great job if they get individualized professional counseling and coaching. And they should never pay a dime for that. Our grantees, the 8 that we fund in the US, the 2 in the UK, they're the best in the country doing this. We assess them quarterly on their performance. So it starts with that. It starts with really getting to know exactly what they're heading for. So, in preparing for that, their outcomes are going to be likely more. That will include tips on how to succeed once they're there. When they are there with the employer, it's really important to build their network. LinkedIn did a phenomenal study, I think it was about 2 years ago, talking about veteran networks. They tend to be very insular. Veterans tend to network with other veterans, and they have big networks, but they're narrow. They're not they're narrow and deep, but they're not broad, and they often don't include civilians. So one of the best things they can do is, once again, the company, an ERG, an employee resource group, we call them something different in our company, but getting involved, that's super important. The best ERGs will proactively reach out, but building those relationships, but not just with veterans. That's a great launching point, but really getting a mentor who's not a veteran, but is interested in your success, super, super important. Learning to speak the language of the company, learning to dress the way folks do at the company. What's the definition of culture? Culture is the way things are done. That's the definition of culture at an organization. Understanding that culture, not trying to force fit your military way of doing things into it, but adopting it, showing that flexibility. And when you're open to that, people will be very open to your own experience as a veteran and want to know and learn from you. So I think being prepared to go into that environment, finding those right initial connections, broadening your network, and then really being open to share your experience with others once you've shown a willingness to embrace a company culture. Those are the techniques I'd recommend.
So I'm sure some people in this room have heard of this, but it's called a skill and passion. It's a 2x2 matrix. It's low skill, high skill, low passion, high passion. We talked about burnout a little bit here. A lot of times when you talk about exhaustion and burnout, people are either doing things that they're not good at or they don't care about. And the 2x2 matrix just has 4 boxes where it's like high skill, low skill, low passion, low skill, high passion, low skill, and high. The truth is, very few of us are high passion, high skill, and most of us hopefully are not living in the low skill, low passion world. But veterans need to take, when you're in a new job in a new industry and you're doing something that you're good at and your strengths are being leveraged, you build confidence immediately. And when you build confidence early on, it enables you to have a bit more clarity on what industry you might want to be in or what role. Because, how many veterans have all of us talked to? They're like, dude, I'll do anything. I'll go into any industry. Great. I have no doubts that you're capable in all of that, except when you go into something brand new that you're not good at and you can't use your skills, then you flounder. And then you're like, shit, I'm not that good at this, or I don't have as much confidence in this civilian world. But if you can weave in something that you're good at and integrate that into a new industry or a new role, you build confidence. And with that, confidence gives a lot of clarity. Talking about what you can provide employers on the employee side, of veterans coming out, one of the things I didn't realize till many years out, the most effective tool I've seen veterans do are find ways to understand what creates value in the organization and look at their background and their experiences and bridge the gap on how they can create this concept of value. That's not just economic capital or financial capital, but if I know a team is very collaboratively driven or it incorporates a lot of smaller teams, like understanding how my experience with small unit leadership or large unit leadership can add value in this organization. But it's finding the right language to bridge the military experience with what the organization with what creates value in the organization. And the last thing I'll throw in there is, in talking, I've been out for 10 years. I've been involved in some level of transitioning service member mentorship or veteran engagement kind of throughout 3 different industries since. A lot of times, veterans can look back at different positive memories associated with their military service. And if they reflect on that, a lot of times people, when you're looking at motivations in an organization or a new setting, a lot of times people are driven by one of 3 things. It's either the purpose or the mission of the organization, it's the technical role or the technical skills 9 to 5, or it's the relationships that you build as a part of the organization. And they're not mutually exclusive. And sometimes they overlap. But a lot of times, if you have people reflect back on their experiences, either in the military, they resonated very deeply with one of those three categories. And it's a telling indicator of where they can probably find fulfillment in professional careers after the military.
And I think we just need to keep moving the timeline to the left. As somebody in the military, if you make it to TAP, you've thought too late in this journey to transition into the civilian side. But this works both ways, convincing the military person to start thinking about this early. Nobody ever expects to stay in the military, but so we don't really think about it all that much. But suddenly it's upon us, our retirement or our decision to get out of the military at the end of the military enlistment obligation. But on our side, people who are helping with those transitions, efforts to try to move that timeline to the left, a 6-month timeline, a 3-month timeline, if we can keep pushing that to a 1-year timeline to allow people this better opportunity to think through these challenges, to allow the employers to have the opportunity to see what the opportunities are, to see how resilient these military personnel and veterans can be, I think that would go and serve us even better.
Yeah, it's hard to advocate for, as a service member coming into on the corporate side, it's really hard to advocate for what your strengths are and what you're looking for if you haven't done that self-reflection on what it is. As I called it, what do I want to do when I grow up, right? That was the most difficult question because you can't Google that, right? You can Google a lot of like, oh, how does this MOS correlate to the civilian side? And I was civil affairs, and it's like, okay, well, what does that mean? All right, well, it says I can do disaster risk reduction and stuff like that. Is that what I want to do? I don't know. But you have to do that reflection of like, what is it that I really want to do? And once you've done that, and then you find that job that's in that industry that you say, like, I want to do, now you can have that confidence to go to your superiors, go to the leadership there to say, like, this is what I did in the military. This is the value I bring to the company. And, oh, by the way, in the military, we were really good at doing like AARs, lessons learned, red teaming, right? The military is very good at poking holes in plans to find gaps and improve those things. And I think that is something that our service members need to remember, that inherently was just ingrained in us of like, let's look at the gaps in how we're doing things in the operations and what recommendations do we have. And that's a great way for them to advocate for themselves and fellow service members, is highlight those. I think a lot of times people are afraid to buck the system or afraid to kind of make waves and like, well, this is how things have always been done here at this company, and I'm just a new person. But those are the exact fresh perspective that I think that we need to encourage in them and then embrace what they have to say.
Before we turn it over to the audience, one last question. Anything to add to this topic when we speak not just about the service members, but to speak about spouses? I know that came up during the last panel. I just want to give time for any panelists to say anything on that. And we think about this in the context of military spouses. Yeah, Dan.
We think a lot at the Call of Duty Endowment. We think a lot about underemployment. So you have to ignore the BLS unemployment numbers. The BLS unemployment numbers are based on one question. It's been asked every month since 1940. Last week, were you paid for work? Last week, were you paid for work? If you answer yes, you're considered fully employed, right? That's it. That's the U.S. unemployment rate. On top of that, they layer the question, are you a veteran? We know a lot of people when asked that question. My dad was in the airborne. To his dying day, he said he wasn't a veteran because he wasn't in combat. We know women are very unlikely or much less likely to admit they are a veteran. So there's a lot of skepticism that should go in that number. When we start looking at underemployment, which hits spouses really hard, the excellent data out of Penn State, the TVMI data, shows that 61% of veterans identify as underemployed. It's even worse for military spouses. This is an incredible talent pool that, because of the constant moves that the Sergeant Major mentioned earlier and many other factors, this talent pool they can't get traction, they can't stay in place. So incredibly, if you have, especially in this post-COVID environment, the opportunity to give flexibility in location, you can tap into an incredible talent pool with spouses. But that's also true with military folks when they leave the service. So mobility, remote work, it's a great option to engage military spouses. But again, veterans, this is also very, very appealing to a lot of veterans who might want to, when they're leaving, might want to stay where they exited the service, but not necessarily where there are a lot of jobs. So for both populations, like thinking about remote work is a great tool to engage vets and spouses is a wonderful strategy.
And I'll just discuss education again, as you might expect that I would, but 25% of WGU's military community is spouses. And it's offering doorways to the future. And hopefully as we move into more and more remote opportunities, this will give spouses an even better future.
So I think what I kind of want to talk about was the ERGs. I know we talked about that a little bit earlier. Employee resource groups. I think that is, if you don't have a robust employee resource group, that is a home for not just veterans, but actively serving service members, right? Our Guard and reservists who need a solid platform and a group where they can feel welcomed and reach out for help. I think you definitely want to build that out. But I think another demographic in there, the military spouses, I think you'd be hard pressed to find people that have to be more resilient than a military spouse. To go from, I mean, I came out of Fort Bragg. At any given time, you could have a unit get no notice and they're gone, and all of a sudden the spouse is left behind picking up the pieces. Oh, and life doesn't stop just because their spouse left for an unknown amount of time. So definitely ensuring that ERG is very robust so that they can voice their concerns and feel welcome in saying that they're a military spouse. But we can also use ERGs to highlight military children, those who grew up in the military. I mean, obviously April is the month of the military child, right? So that is another demographic of people that have ties to the military, tons of resiliency there, and they have a lot of experience that they can bring to the company to discuss how we can help our veterans and our military spouses as well.
Yeah, I cannot speak intelligently to large-scale military spouse procedures, systems. I'm with a very small engineering and construction management consulting firm here in the Mid-Atlantic, but I do certainly understand the importance of factoring that into the equation when you look at evaluating veterans and their families for hire, and just simply tying that into the communication or the community component of how you engage your veteran candidates. You mentioned the ERGs, but understanding that people have been in lots of different duty stations, moved all over, deployed, spent time apart from one another. That's a serious consideration that many other demographics have not had to navigate in their professional careers. So just at least understanding and being empathetic to that in the interview process.
Turn it over to the audience. If anyone in the audience has a question from the panel. Anybody? Yeah. All right. Well, while we hold, if anyone has any thoughts, feel free to stand up. We've got the mics right here. Anything else, Dan, Jesse, Jeff, and Seth, that you feel needs to be said that hasn't been said yet? Anything else you want to speak to in this forum?
I'll just talk to sort of the cultural acclimation being so important for veterans to be successful. It unlocks their potential. You heard so much this morning about the potential, and it's all true. But what gets in the way are cultural barriers sometimes. So, being able to take time, and a lot of veterans can't, to do that. For me, when I got out, I went to business school, and business school was a perfect sort of decompression time for me. I learned the language of business. I built my network beyond the veteran community. A lot of veterans don't get that opportunity, or they just can't take that time. By the way, still paying off those business school loans 20 years later. So thanks, Admiral. No, I'm just kidding. Look, I think like the biggest mistake veterans make, there's a fallacious number out there that says 50% of veterans leave their job after the first year. It's actually not true. It's a number that came out of IVMF that IVMF has been trying to stomp out for years. So if you hear that, it's not true. It was based on a Snap poll on their website years ago. The fact is, veterans, even in that first job, they tend to do better or as well as non-veterans in their first job. But when it doesn't work out, it's because they felt rushed. They didn't get a chance to do their due diligence. They didn't get a chance to analyze fit. The skills are there. The soft skills certainly are there. A lot of times the hard skills are there too. But cultural fit, it's so important. It's very hard from coming out of the military to actually assess the cultural fit of really, it's almost like going to a foreign country for many veterans, especially if you're like me, when you went in when you were 17 and got out much later. It is totally foreign to you. You could be interviewing for the first time for a job when you're anywhere between the age of 25 and 45. So taking the time, and again, that one-on-one counseling, which should always be free to veterans, to help them assess culture of an organization and assess, is this really the kind of place you want to be? What are your expectations? And going in with humility too. I think most veterans do. Some go in with too much humility where they don't sell themselves hard enough. I've seen that many, many times. A few of them, there's a little bit of an entitlement mentality sometimes that also needs check. Like, there's no guidance counselor here. There's no detailer. There's no one to manage your career. You are responsible for career. This system you've been defending for your career in the military, this capitalist system, welcome to capitalism. There's no, no free lunch, right? It's like, if something seems too good, it probably is. If the pay's really high, you're probably going to work really, really hard, and you have to know that. So someone needs to speak truth to veterans about this stuff before they start. And again, that one-on-one counseling from organizations like Hire Heroes USA, Vet Jobs, still serving veterans, always free, super high quality, 1/13 the cost of, me as a funder, as DOL efforts. So I would push veterans there to ensure, to those kind of organizations, to ensure they have that right fit.
Yeah, we got one. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Patrick Curran, West Point 97, and everyone here, thank you for all your support for our veterans
Beat
and
Army.
their families. Yeah, be Navy. A question I have is I'm an ERG lead for Pfizer, PFIZER. So I hear Pfizer, the other company, it's 5-star. We look up to you. Great job. So one of the challenges I personally had, and I see very often, is that you have military that leave a very structured environment, and then they have to go into the fluid environment. I was in a fog for about 10 years, after 2002 to 2012. It got better after about 2008 or 9. But my whole thing is, how do we accelerate the transition process for ownership? Any tips you can give an ERG lead like myself and others in the room? Thank you.
I'm going to throw out one is it's about two-way communication. You're mentioning veterans across the board. Everybody's different. Everybody's been in different services, different ranks. It's effective communication, and that's advocacy for what the veteran needs, and that's the ability for the manager, non-veteran or veteran, to step up and understand, listen, and then see if you can come up with an implementation plan. What I found through the research was if you're engaging veterans as they transition out, if they have a mentor, they have a buddy, if you find ways to incorporate into their role an element of challenge, finding ways that they're motivated, finding ways that they are integrated into a community, and ways that they are effectively communicated with on the individual, team, and organizational level, I really think it streamlines that transition. But it stems from two-way communication. And so the onus is on the veteran, and it's on the organization down to the individual manager.
So I'll say if you want a newly hired veteran to excel and really blossom into what you're looking for, you give them clear guidance, left and right limits on what is acceptable, what's not acceptable, and what do you expect from them. That's something that we grew up in the military, and we are used to having clear, concise guidance. You tell me what is a go, no go, what is exceeds expectations by the end of the year. You can give that to them, any rank, from the most junior enlisted all the way up to commanders. That's what they're used to hearing, and they can understand, they can digest it quickly, and then they can figure out how they can go above and beyond your expectations. But if you give them this gray, like, hey, I just want you to kind of feel around, get to know the company, I want you to work on some projects, we'll kind of talk about it more later. Like, if you're not clear in what you expect of them, we can't expect them to transition quickly and rise above what we want. Like, how can we expect them if we don't know what it is we expect them to do?
Two things. Structured onboarding, which every company should do for every employee, regardless. I just hired someone, and we have a 12-page onboarding, customized, individualized onboarding guide to make sure folks are meeting with those who we think they need to get that fast on-ramp to culture. And again, culture isn't this airy fairy thing. It's the way things are done in a company. That's what culture is. It's the way things are done. So the sooner, I think you said, like the left and right guardrails, right? Like what are the parameters of how we work? Making that clear, not making this thing you just have to figure out, super helpful. The second thing is analysis. When veterans are not succeeding in a company, you need to know, stop guessing, look at attrition, look at people who aren't promoting or aren't promoting as fast. I'll give you one quick story. A world-class consulting firm, this is not my company, it's a different company, but I'm very impressed by what they did, had a very aggressive veteran hiring program. They hired a lot of veterans. And they went in as consultants, they did their first engagement, and they did great. They all got top marks. Then they ran into a problem. The biggest problem for an individual in a consulting firm is not being staffed, because if you're not staffed on a project, you're not making money for the company. It's called being on the beach. All of a sudden, they noticed a lot of these veterans were on the beach. They weren't getting staffed. So they did what a consulting firm would do. They analyzed it, and they wanted to figure out what none of the veterans, or very few of the veterans, had figured out was they had to sell themselves into a partner for their next engagement. And they realized that veterans were terrible at honking their own horn or tooting their own horn and selling themselves, talking about the value they could bring to a team internally. So you know what they did? The next class of veterans coming in, they gave them an extra day on how to market themselves within the firm. The next year, veterans were the most retained group in the company. But they found that thing that was getting in the way of their success in the company, and they ran at it.
Gentlemen, thank you very much.
Before we wrap, just want to open the floor one more time for our panelists. Any last parting thoughts you want to leave? Anything?
Yeah. I would just say, we talked about PTSD earlier, and I think a lot of times we're wondering, like, oh, do I want to hire a veteran? There's going to be special circumstances that I'm going to have to deal with. They're going to have needs that are above and beyond what normal employees or associates would have. So it's like, do we want to kind of deal with that? And I think that's something we need to kind of reevaluate. Sometimes I don't think any veteran wants special circumstances. They don't want to be hired. They don't want to be hired under certain circumstances or feel like their PTSD or their disabilities and whatnot make them a burden. I think we need to embrace a culture where their needs are really no different than any other need of the associate. And yes, they have a lot of skills, but they should also see that they are no different than the people to the left and the right, other than the set of skills and experiences that they bring that are unique to them. But we should look at it as no different than any of our DEI employees that we would hire, right? So I think that's something that is important, that we don't lump them into feeling like veterans have a special program that they partake in, right? It is the program of that we are taking care of our associates, because that is how you have a good company, is to take care of your associates and make them feel valued.
We don't want people to feel infantilized. Basically, that's what. Yeah. All right. Well, look, thank you so much again to our panelists. Y'all, let's give another round, a huge round of applause. And once again, Dan Goldenberg, Call of Duty Endowment, Jesse Gimberling Johnson, MCFA, Jeff Hartley, Western Governors University, and Seth Peterson, Fiserv. Thank you so much, everyone. All right.